Hi, everybody. This is DeeKnight. I'm the author of my Whirlwind Lives, Navigating Decades of Storms, soon out from Guernica Editions. Um, I have recently written uh, an article that's appeared in several different publications about President Ford's very weird Summit for Democracy, which I call the apex of hypocrisy. Just so you know, you can read the whole thing on my blog, DeeKnight.blog. But I'm going to present it to you uh, with additional commentary right here, right now, in two or three sections. I'll stop at a comfort place for you to decide if you want to go on or if you want to jump to the blog and read it for yourself. Here we go. President Biden's December 9th and 10th Summit for Democracy has already stirred up a storm. The White House says the summit will have three principal themes: defending against authoritarianism, fighting corruption, and promoting respect for human rights, clearly targeting Washington's chosen autocratic states: China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. The government of Taiwan is among the 100 plus invitees, prompting suspicions that a key goal is de facto recognition of the island as a sovereign state. This continues the systematic gutting of the 1972 Shanghai Communique signed by Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger, in which the U.S. acknowledged the One China policy and agreed to cut back military installations on Taiwan. Now Taiwan is bristling with U.S. military installations of all kinds and has trainers from the United States on site, also in violation of the Shanghai Communique. It's a pressure campaign against China, threatening world peace, despite recent friendly talk between Biden and Xi. The summit will not succeed. It is at once too blunt and too thin an instrument, wrote David Adler, director of the Progressive International, and Stephen Wertheim, deputy director of the Quincy Institute. It's liable to drive U.S. foreign policy even further down a failed course that divides the world into hostile camps, prioritizing confrontation over cooperation, they wrote. And that's exactly what's happening. The Chinese and Russian ambassadors to Washington issued a joint op-ed statement November 27th saying the summit will stoke up ideological confrontation and a rift in the world, creating new dividing lines. They said the U.S. is empowering itself to define who is a democratic country and who is not. Democracy is not a prerogative of a certain country or group of countries, but a universal right of all principles, the joint communique said. It can be realized in multiple ways, and no model can fit all countries. Whether a country's path works depends on whether it meets the country's realities and brings about economic development, social stability, and progress, and better lives for the people. Ultimately, it relies on the support of the people and will be proven by its contribution to human progress. In terms of popular support and looking at these standards, it's possible to say that China seems to be doing better right now than the U.S. I wrote another essay on this that you can find on my blog. I'll keep going. The State Department, in a refreshingly frank moment, said the summit will also showcase one of democracy's unique strengths: the ability to acknowledge its imperfections. A New Yorker article by Sue Halpern, November 30th, said Freedom House ranked the state of democracy in the United States well below countries in Latin America and Eastern Europe, citing gerrymandering, the influence of money in politics, and the disenfranchisement of people of color among the reasons for the poor showing. The article comments, there's something deeply wishful about hosting a summit to bolster democracy around the world when our own is at best floundering. Halpern cites the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, a think tank based in Stockholm, Sweden, which added the United States to its list of backsliding democracies. The visible deterioration of democracy in the United States, as seen in the increasing tendency to contest credible election results, the efforts to suppress participation in elections, and the runaway polarization, is one of the most concerning developments, the group's Secretary General said. He also noted that the violent contestation of the 2020 election without any evidence of fraud has been replicated in different ways in places as diverse as Myanmar, Peru, and Israel. I suggest that you could add Venezuela, Nicaragua, China, and Iran to this list, for starters. Both Venezuela and Nicaragua had national elections in November that were loudly denounced in advance in Washington and the mainstream U.S. media. More than 300 observers from 55 countries, including the EU and the Carter Center, were on hand for Venezuela's voting. The EU mission leaders said everything was proceeding calmly, as governorships of 19 of the country's 23 states were won by the Chavista coalition, according to a report from the Council on Hemispheric Affairs. In Nicaragua, over 165 representatives and 67 journalists from 27 countries visited well over 100 election centers throughout the country. While the Biden administration labeled the election a sham, the delegates' observations contradict these accusations. They observed an election that was efficient, transparent, with widespread turnout and participation of 6 opposition parties, including 2 which last headed the government. President Biden dismissed the vote as a pantomime election. The Organization of American States demanded the annulment of the elections and called for holding new ones, disregarding international and OAS rules that require respect for the sovereignty of nations. If there was fraud in Nicaragua's elections, where's the proof? Asked the Council on Hemispheric Affairs in an on-site report issued November 16th. The report, by John Perry from Masaya, Nicaragua, provides a detailed description of the voting process and, most importantly, directly refutes the various U.S. media attacks. It specifically answers Professor William Robinson of NACLA, who claimed there was a total absence of safeguards against fraud. The COA report responds in detail to Robinson's accusations and those of official U.S. media, which parroted local opposition papers lavishly funded by the U.S. National Endowment for Democracy and Agency for International Development. The ballot included 5 candidates challenging Daniel Ortega for the presidency. The New York Times said, wrongly, that all are little-known members of parties aligned with the Sandinista government. In fact, Perry notes, these are historic parties. 2 of them, the PLC and PLI, had formed governments in the years 1990 to 2006, and in the case of the PLC in particular, enjoy significant traditional support. The Sandinista Front itself won as part of an alliance of 9 legal parties. While the COA article exposed the implausibility of the various accusations, the real response to them was the scenes on the streets on Election Day and during the celebrations, when the results were announced on November 8th. While some of the media portrayed empty streets and deserted polling stations, there were hundreds of photos which showed the opposite. After President Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas won by a large margin, Ben Norton of the Gray Zone reported the Biden administration rejected the results and instead launched what amounts to a new coup attempt against Nicaragua's Sandinista government, including a regime of crushing sanctions. It's not democracy in Nicaragua that causes U.S. reaction. It's the independent anti-imperialist path that is chosen, just like Venezuela. The Task Force on the Americas issued a report in 2018 following the coup attempt that year. It found Nicaragua was the safest country in Latin America, recognized for its innovative community policing policies, minimal outflow of refugees to the U.S. border, far from a dictatorship, with polls showing President Ortega had the highest approval rating of any chief of state in the hemisphere, with social indices on the rise, literacy, economic growth, small business promotion, and free public education among the highest in the region. The hybrid warfare campaign aimed at overthrowing Nicaragua's Sandinista government has many parallels with the ongoing U.S. coup attempts against Venezuela and Cuba, as well as the military push the OAS oversaw against Bolivia's elected socialist president Evo Morales in 2019. In Latin America, the U.S. actively sabotages democracy rather than defending it, especially in countries that steer a path independent of Washington. Let's stop there for now. We'll continue shortly or in a follow up clip. Meanwhile, if you want, you can click out and go to DeeKnight.blog and read the whole article. It's called um, Summit for Democracy, Apex of Hypocrisy. To be continued.